Welcome into the Gaming Discourse. I'm Tyler Frater, alongside Richard Day the Cruz, who's not here today, and Chief Engineer Lieutenant Commander Connor Frater.
In the PAP 5x5.
It is June 2nd, 2025. Go to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/gamingdiscourse, patreon.com/thegamingdiscourse. You can support us for $247, $10. Get your name in the video credits, early access to our videos, access to our Discord server, and more. I'm doing Friday morning blogs now. Every Friday morning, I write up something small, real quick, throw up on the Patreon instead of just doing our Patreon updates. I do the Patreon updates, but I also do a little blog about something that's on my mind. So this past week, it was about nostalgia in games. Do you still get nostalgic about games? How do we feel about that? Before that, it was my 10 favorite horror games. That was a fun one to do. So yeah,
What was number 6?
I didn't number them.
For shame.
I know. It was like Fear. It was a lot of horror games that are on a lot of people's list. Fear, Amnesia: The Dark Descent, Resident Evil 4, Silent Hill 2.
Hello Kitty Island Adventure.
Of course, yeah. I put Elite Dangerous in the honorable mentions, even though it's not technically a horror game. It is still one of the scariest games. The Thargoid! It's still one of the scariest games I've ever played. Actually, getting interdicted by a Thargoid is scary. Especially because they didn't announce it was going to happen. So the first guy was just flying through space, and he got interdicted in between jumps, right? So in Elite Dangerous, you only get interdicted in Super Cruise because players are interdicting you.
Yeah.
And when you're jumping between stars, it's a loading screen. But in the fiction of the game, it's like multi-dimensional, right?
Yeah.
You're traveling through like the space between space. So there's no one else there. So when this guy got interdicted, he was flying through hyperspace, and then it said hyperspace interdiction detected, and then he just tumbled out of hyperspace. All of his instruments were out, and this is what happens. And the Thargoid, this huge ship, just flies up to him, and it just and starts to scan him. Must have been just absolutely terrifying. But yeah, that was years ago now.
Ensign, bring me my brown pants.
Exactly. Okay, so we've got lots to talk about, lots to read later on. There's some interesting stuff that I would like to get into. Some meat sandwich quotes, as I like to say. But what have you been playing?
I've just been cracking out with Europa Universalis 4.
Yeah, because the new one's coming out.
Yeah.
So you were like, it's time to get
another 1,000 hours into it.
1,000 hours. So what country are you playing? Give me the lowdown real quick.
My most recent run was with France. I ended up getting a personal union, which is my king is also the king of this country, but not necessarily the head of state.
The king of this country, you
like
mean?
like my king is also like I got a personal union over another country, which is my ruler is also the ruler of this country, but not necessarily the head of state of that country. It might be like his wife or his son or whatever.
Okay, I didn't even know that was a thing.
Yes.
Okay.
Over the Spanish.
Wow.
So
that's a big country.
Yes, and a very strong country, especially when it's like 1560 and they have 8 billion colonies.
Yeah.
And they've, consolidated all of Spain, so it's just them and Portugal. Aragon's gone, Granada's gone. And they're just a powerhouse, and then me, the Western European powerhouse. And I'm like, all right, so I could just take on the rest of Europe now because no one can stop me. Yeah. And so I conquered all of Italy, and I'm like, this is getting boring real quick.
Wow, goddamn. Did that take a lot of luck, or does that happen?
It does take a fair amount of luck. Okay. I forget the like exact parameters it needs for a personal union to happen, but one of them is you need to be of the same dynasty.
Okay. And
my dynasty had taken over Spain through just royal marriages. They had family members that were needing married off, and I married off, and then my dynasty ended up on the throne. And then through connections there, my ruler became the ruler of Spain. I'm like, unlimited power.
Wow, well, congratulations.
Thank you.
It would be cool if you could take that save. Can you take that save into Victoria?
No.
Oh, that's too bad.
Okay, there probably
the one where you can't.
There probably is a mod for it.
Well, wait, after Europa Universalis would be
Victoria, yeah.
Would be Victoria.
Because Europa Universalis ends 1821.
Yeah, okay.
Victoria starts 1836.
Okay.
And goes till 1936.
The reason that would be cool is because it would be interesting to see how a possible World War One would play out if France was as big as France and Spain and
well, it was I was essentially Napoleonic France.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
to how Napoleonic France would do in a.
I was Napoleonic France in the 1500s.
Yeah, there's a lot of hypotheticals and like who knows, but it'd be interesting to see how that would impact like. Does World War One always happen in Victoria or?
I don't know if it always happens, but there's always like ongoing conflicts between the great powers.
Okay.
Between like your United Kingdom and France and the German Empire and Austria and Russia. There's always some conflict, whether or not it's like skirmishing over territorial growth in Africa or all-out war between the two.
It's interesting that the games, because Crusader Kings takes place over like hundreds of years, right?
Yes.
Europa Universalis, hundreds of years.
Yes.
Victoria, 100 years. And then Hearts of Iron,
10.
10 years. So it's like so much happens where they like accordion it down. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious if like,
well, but also,
and not that a lot didn't happen during the 1500s.
Like
and stuff,
in Hearts of Iron, you don't play day by day like you do in. You play hour by hour.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah,
I forgot about that. Man, I want to get into these games so bad, but it's just I don't even know the first. I've launched them and then I'm looking at the interface and I don't even know what to click. I'm like, what? I guess I'll send this army over here. Like I just have
there is a steep learning cliff. Yeah. There are really good tutorials of like getting your way into the games that you can find online. Paradox has never really produced a good how to play our game. So,
Yeah, maybe one day. Okay.
Just remember, just jump into Europe Universalis, play as the Ottomans.
Oh no, that's the easy version. Yeah. So I've played a few hours of Expedition 33. That's a lot of people are saying it's got lots of hype. A lot of people are saying it's their game of the year this year and whatnot. I'm certainly enjoying it right now. I honestly have no idea what my game of the year would be. It's not Blueprints, I know that. But other than that, I'm not sure what it would be. But I am enjoying it. It's the art direction is very loud. It's set. I don't know if there's a specific year that it's supposed to be set, but it definitely looks Belle Epoque, turn of the century, kind of right around that. The art direction is very loud. It's very like boisterous and very colorful. I showed you some of it. There's lots of bloom. Everything is very dreamlike.
Dreamscape, yeah.
Like there's a part in the game that it takes place in an ocean, but there's no water. But it's just like, it's kind of hard to describe. Imagine walking at the bottom of the ocean and there's whales swimming above you, but there's no water. The whales are just sort of swimming through the air.
Yeah.
So it's very dreamlike, very almost surreal in a sense. And I think I enjoy that a lot because that does give the game a sense of like otherworldliness and a sense of mystery because you're surrounded by this like strange magic and this whimsy and stuff. It is a very morbid game in some ways because it is about like it's about death. All these characters, as you know, as the expedition clock goes down, as the paintress puts a new number, you can't grow older than that age or whatever. So it's like people die at a younger and younger age every year. And so the idea of the expedition is to somehow stop that, right? So there is like there is a morbidity, there is a sense of impending doom. I think it's an interesting game for our current times because there's the thing that we hear is like, sometimes it just feels like the world is ending. We don't look at the future like we did 70 years ago, where we had yet to land on the moon, and and it was here's the house of the future, and in the future the man will work in his union and he'll go to space, and the Jetsons had flying cars. It's like our depictions of the future now are like everything's gonna suck. It's much closer to Cyberpunk 2077. So Expedition 33 I think fits our current time because it doesn't. The future is not an optimistic thing. The future is something that is coming at us, coming after us, instead of something that we are going to conquer. and that's an interesting premise for a game. And it also makes for characters that have something in the back of their minds constantly.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like Gustav, he has a journal you can write in, and so it's like, you know, you're writing in a journal, and he says, and it describes him as like, he hopes the people that, because he was gifted this journal by people that, like, kids that were younger than him that think he's cool. So when he writes in his journal, the thing that pops up is Gustav hopes that the people that gifted him this journal will be able to read it one day, right? So it's like, he already, his sort of conception of reality is, I'm writing in this journal not for me, but for people that will come after me. And that's the famous saying in the game. Gustav says, for those, you know, when he does one of his attacks, he says, for those who come after, right? Because it's all about paving the way, is for getting as far as you can. And if you can get to the paintress, great. But if you can't, you want to make as much room as you can for the next expedition that hopefully can, you know, come and follow in your footsteps. So there is, like, in a lot of conversations, the characters do have like this terminal illness in the back of their mind where they know their time is incredibly limited. And so when, you know, I think that's interesting, because when you're surrounded by death and endings so much, you know, how does that change society? How does that change the way you perceive time, perceive life and existing? Yeah, that's all interesting. And the combat's good. You start off with just Gustav, and then you eventually find more characters, and their abilities are pretty diverse. Gustav seems to be relatively versatile. He has some healing abilities, he has some buffs. Gustav's big ability, the Overcharge, does a crap ton of lightning damage onto a single enemy, but you have to get charges. So you have to do some, like, basic attacks to get his charges up, because if you do it while it has like 1 or 2 charges, it's basically an average attack.
Yeah.
But if you do it when it has 10 charges, which is the maximum, it's the move that you save for the boss kind of thing, right? That you plan around when you're in boss fights. So that's kind of Gustav, and it looks really cool. I mean, I was talking about the art direction earlier with, like, the dreaminess of it all, but even the UI is neat, very reminiscent of Persona. The attacks are like floating off to the side of the character. Every character has cool, like, they have swords and stuff that they swing, and they look neat when they're about to attack or whatever. And the music is the music's really good. There's one song that's like it's like a dancing. I'm not sure how to describe it. There's an accordion. And it's a it kind of sounds like a. Oh man, what is John Candy's band in Home Alone?
Polka.
Yeah, polka. Yes, it kind of sounds like polka, but it only plays when you attack a specific enemy. But I just thought it was so funny because the enemy that you fight against are these, like, automaton mimes that you attack. It's very strange, and the mimes attacks are all done with, like, invisible weapons. So when the mime's defensive move is it builds a wall in front of it that's invisible. So the joke is, it's a mime that's building a wall, but the wall's actually there to protect it. So it's very silly. But yeah, this, like, polka song is actually damn good when you're in the middle of a fight and you're, like, picking different moves and Gustav's, like, spinning around and stuff. So yeah, I am enjoying it a lot. I can't wait to get into it more. I haven't been able to spend, like, a solid chunk of hours on it. It's been piece by piece throughout. But yeah, and then one other game that I picked up on a whim and recently played was Gris, which came out a couple years ago, developed by Nomada Studios, who just did Neva last year, and published by Devolver, a platforming puzzle game that is absolutely gorgeous. Gorgeous soundtrack, gorgeous visuals. The visuals are very watercolor based. So the colors are all sort of cloudy and thin, right, as watercolor is. And the architecture feels like you're walking through temples. And I really didn't. I enjoyed that a lot. It's not very long. It was like 4 or 5 hours. and I'm glad I played it because it's nice to play a small game like that every now and then. And I found a physical copy, so I was really excited because I got that because I collect physical copies because I'm a nerd. But yeah, so if you're wanting something that's like nice, relaxing, interesting, thoughtful, it's a story that doesn't explain itself. So you're not really sure, what exactly you're doing. But as the game goes on, I think it gives some hints that you're like trying to revitalize the world, bring something back to the world, build something up where there's a force in the world that is trying to deconstruct it and tear it down, and you're kind of trying to do the opposite thing. But yeah, it's very aesthetically pleasing just from like listening to it. You dive through water a lot, so there's lots of like like calming water splash sounds and stuff like that. The DualSense controller is awesome. It feels so cool when you do some of the actions in the game. One of the goals in the game is to get these little stars. These are the things that are at the end of puzzles. And when you get it, it kind of sounds like a gong goes off. And when you hold that DualSense, it feels like your hand is on a cymbal. The reverb on a cymbal. It feels so cool. It feels like the controller is hollow and someone has, like a cowbell or something, and someone's ringing it on the side.
Yeah.
It's really neat that the DualSense can do all that. And that added to my experience because every time I picked up one of those stars, the DualSense just reverberated and it added to the relaxation of the game and sort of the tactile response. So yeah, Gris Expedition 33. And now I'm going to talk for 12 hours about IL-2. Just kidding.
Go ahead.
I won't do that. I actually haven't. I died a couple days ago in IL-2 and it made me mad and I haven't come back since. I need to remember in IL-2 it's not an action game. Like I was telling you this, it's more of an RPG. If you decide to fly a Mosquito, you can't take on a squadrons of 109s or 190s or really anything else.
You're not a dogfighter.
You're not a dogfighter. You can maybe take on one or something to defend yourself, but it's like you get the hell out if there's a squadron of aircraft coming after you. And that's just a lesson I need to learn. Okay, you ready for the news?
Do it.
Thanks for listening. If you like our content, please consider subscribing or leaving a like and comment. You can find us at patreon.com/thegamingdiscourse. And our tiers are $2, $4, $7, and $10 and include getting your name in the video credits, early access, and access to our Discord server. EA has closed Cliffhanger Games. I believe this was first reported by IGN, but I'm not particularly sure on that, but I think it was. Cliffhanger's upcoming Black Panther game is also canceled, and EA is also laying off people from its mobile and central teams. An email sent to staff written by EA Entertainment President Laura Meal says the cuts are happening to, quote, sharpen our focus and put our creative energy behind the most significant growth opportunities, whatever. The email says EA will be focusing on a handful of franchises moving forward: Battlefield, Sims, Skate, and Apex Legends. And that's specifically EA Entertainment. EA Sports is a different division. Yeah. So, but I would imagine from EA.
Well, if they're getting rid of this, that's more money to put into everything else. So expect more fucking bullshit in FIFA.
Yeah, there's that. I don't know. EA's. This is frustrating just because. I mean, it's because people are laid off. Two, it doesn't sound like the Black Panther game was. It doesn't sound like it was stuck in development hell and burning cash. Jason Schreier wrote a piece for Bloomberg. It had gotten past something he called a gate, which was some kind of milestone that apparently seems to indicate it was on a nice trajectory, right? Even if it was still early in development, even if it had taken a couple of years, it seems as though it was still like at a nice trajectory. So Schreier's story did not seem to indicate that it was in development hell and people were leaving and it was just burning cash. So this seems like greed is what it seems like. It seems like Electronic Arts decided that they, and really I think specifically with regards to Battlefield, I think what we have is a company that is focusing that on user-generated content. And we're going to talk about user-generated content a lot in a little bit, but I think that's sort of the next thing that a lot of companies are going to try and get into, because they've seen the money that Roblox is generating and Fortnite is generating. And so they want to figure out how to make their own little cuts into that market. And so for them, I think that's what Battlefield is going to be. It's frustrating that EA seems to, I don't know, it's like, was Dragon Age, the Veilguard, were the expectations that it failed to meet reasonable? And two, who made the decision that it needed to include live service elements? Like, how did that, I don't know, how did that come about? It's the same conversation we've had with Anthem, right? Like, I'm sure it wasn't like Andrew Wilson himself said, Anthem, I want you guys to make a live service game and call it Anthem, right?
Yeah.
The systemic causes for Anthem are more complicated than that. But at the same time, I do think there has to be people responsible for these kinds of decisions. Even if it's complicated, even if it's not entirely their fault, there still has to be somebody somewhere, some group of people somewhere. And it's like, okay, well, why were these decisions made? And what are the consequences of the people that actually made those decisions? Now, what the point I'm trying to get to is like with Veilguard, was Veilguard created in an environment where it was the kind of game that it needed to be, or was it created in an environment where it had a bunch of tacked on live service bullshit? And that's apparently what it was at first, right? Because it eventually got retooled. So it's like, okay, so Veilguard's partial failure, if you want to describe it as a failure, a commercial failure, critically, it's mixed. There are some things I didn't like, some things I thought were fine. But Veilguard's commercial failure was not a failure of like the market that is completely disinterested. And it is not that nobody plays action RPGs anymore. It's that it was built in an environment that I think is just uninterested in it because it cannot make as much money as FIFA. And so EA just doesn't care. And that's really frustrating. And what we see here is, I mean, I would have to assume that this is the same kind of thing. It seems as though Black Panther was fine, was on its way. It was using the Nemesis system. I don't know much about Marvel. You were going to fight the Skrull, which are like aliens or something. Yeah. I don't know if they were in any of the movies. But it sounds like it was well on its way. It sounds like it had some really cool ideas, but it just didn't fit EA's short-term goals. And that's what these are, right? Like, these are not long-term planning goals. This is trend chasing and you know, cutting down on the things that aren't going to make you a ton of money over the short term, right? And instead trying to invest into trend chasing and finding the properties that best align with that trend chasing. And that sucks. So yeah, sorry, is there anything you would want to add here?
Just a Secret Invasion was the scroll.
The TV with the AI generated intro, I believe it was. Sorry, so was there anything else?
On the topic of like, where is this all coming from? Like, who's making these decisions? We do know that it is C-suite executives who aren't in touch with what's actually moving down on the work floor. It is people that are just looking at metrics and numbers and making decisions based off of it. People like John Riccitiello.
Sure. Yeah. Well, yeah, and John Riccitiello hasn't. I think the last time he was the CEO of a game publisher was EA.
Yeah.
Because after that he went to Epic, I think.
Unity.
Remember. Yeah, Unity. I'm sorry, Unity.
Yeah.
And then he obviously left Unity after that for
but
for pissing everybody off.
Which is what he like in one of the people that laid the groundwork for what EA became.
Yeah, that's interesting because Riccitiello took over EA when it was moving away from a different it's actually an interesting story that I know a little bit about. But like Riccitiello took over for EA's previous CEO.
Yep.
Because Riccatello was CEO of EA back in the early 2000s as well. Then he left. He did some private equity stuff, his own thing. I don't know if it was private equity. It may have been, I don't know. He did his own stuff.
Yeah.
And a different guy took over. I don't remember the guy's name who was EA's CEO during from 2004 to 2006 or whatever. But Riccatello came in right around 2006, 2007, and when he was in there, there was the stock market crash of 2008, so that was tough on the economy. But also that was the digital revolution, right? Because in 2007 you had the Apple Store open on phones, game consoles more easily can connect to the internet, the ubiquity of internet, etc., etc. Game companies start to say, hey, how do we do this live service thing? And so between 2007 and 2012-ish, right? You have game companies just trying to figure out how to establish, how to make money off of online connectivity, right? And then after that, I think Riccatello left EA in 2013, 2012, maybe. And that's when Andrew Wilson comes in. And that coincides with FIFA turning all the sports titles into live service games. EA's stock price skyrockets, and that's kind of where we're at now. As far as I know, the stock price has continued to rise, but it has not risen the same way that it did between 2014 and 2018 or whatever. But it is still, I think, relatively doing well. And I honestly have no idea if there's anyone that's upset enough that Andrew Wilson's tenure is teetering. I don't think so. One question, but so sorry, so it's interesting that we talk about EA's history and how we've gotten here, because I do wonder, because I think people, EA has only been this financial behemoth, I think, for the past 10-ish years. Before that, they were one of the bigger companies, and then Activision, their main rival, supplanted them, and that's when Riccatello came in. So nowadays, no one really, I don't think anyone cares about who is the biggest game publisher, because they all have their cash cows. Activision has COD, EA has FIFA, so who gives a shit? But anyway, that was a completely useless tangent. I'm sorry. What I'm curious about is what is the threshold with things like this? Because, Joseph Ferris at Hazelight, he said something a couple months ago where he said something like, EA's always been really great with us. I don't understand why they get so much hate. And from Ferris's perspective, I get it. He has his own studio. Every couple years, they make some amazing game. They make a game that is couch co-op based, which is one of those things that doesn't exist a whole lot today, but clearly lots of people still want. So there's lots of enthusiasm for Hazelight's games. And and it's great that EA continues to invest in that kind of thing. But at what point, I don't know, I don't think I'm crazy in wondering, at what point is Hazelight the target of something like this? I don't know, if Hazelight's next game doesn't sell as well, which would be insane, because Split Fiction did extremely well. It's one of the biggest games. It's another game that could be Game of the Year material. Who knows? I think it's wide open, to be honest. But if Hazelight's next game doesn't do that well, if it has a higher budget, whatever, is Hazelight going to be in the crosshairs next time? I don't know. So, and actually, when I say that, I don't know if Hazelight is owned by EA. I should reiterate that. I don't know who owns Hazelight. They may just have a publishing deal with Electronic Arts. So that may not be the best example. But when you pivot to finding growth, it's okay, that's going to be short-term stuff. And at what point are you cutting things that seem like they're not in the crosshair right now? And at what point are you cutting things that are working? It seemed like Black Panther was working. It was working fine. So it didn't sound like it was something that was in development hell that was burning cash. I think we have to emphasize that.
Yeah, Hazelight is a private company not owned by EA.
Okay, yeah, so that's
they just publish through EA.
Okay, so that's not a good example. So Hazelight hopefully will be unaffected because they don't, and hopefully Hazelight will never be owned by EA.
Yeah.
But so yeah, that's anyway, yeah, this sucks. Black Panther sounded cool. It sucks because I don't know. Another thing is as much as we want to complain about movies and them churning out superhero movies, at least the film industry just gets it fucking done. I don't know. It's like, at least they put the shit out, right? It's like the games industry, we're constantly getting games like this canceled and things are getting cut, and it's just frustrating. So this is, this makes me, this is classic Electronic Arts cutting something that works, undermining something, whether it's Anthem, whether it's
taking another publisher out behind the woodshed, or developer.
Yeah, so like with BioWare, I think EA didn't know how to handle BioWare, and here we go.
Yeah.
With Dead Space, they didn't know how to handle Dead Space, and here we go. They remade the first Dead Space, and apparently because not every single person on the planet bought a copy at full price, that we're not going to get a remake of Dead Space 2, which is the best Dead Space. And we're here, and it's like they don't know how to handle this single player game, so they're just gonna cut it off and refocus, and that's too bad. And this puts more pressure on the next Battlefield too, because if you're putting your eggs, if you just cracked a bunch of eggs and now you have fewer eggs and you're putting them into fewer baskets, that puts more emphasis on those eggs to be a success. So now that puts more emphasis on your Battlefields and your Sims and your Apex Legends to perform. And what happens when they don't, FIFA didn't perform as well, and they fucking acted like they broke a bunch of laws or something. So, I don't know. I don't think that bodes well for any of those franchises, but like things like The Sims, is already just a live service hell pit anyway, so I don't know how much worse it could actually get. But for Battlefield, it's like the next Battlefield, like you're retooling Battlefield, right? Because Battlefield has not been, you have to figure it out. And honestly, Battlefield 5, I don't think was that bad. I think it was actually pretty good. I'm not sure how well it sold. Battlefield 1 I thought was pretty cool. But yeah, Battlefield 2142, I never played it, but lots of people said it was bad. It clearly wasn't well received, and it didn't sell well and stuff like that. But like if you want to remake Battlefield, if you want to redo it, retool this franchise, it makes me less excited when you're retooling it to chase after trends.
Yeah.
Which like figuring out how to create like this user generated content environment or whatever.
Roll it back, go back to 1942, give us bots, and rake in the cash.
Yeah, I think simplicity would be the better way to go. Simplicity, but also for Battlefield specifically, like I want to drive an aircraft carrier. Like make that happen somehow.
Yeah.
And also like one thing that I've always been confused about because Battlefield's never like known what to do with its single player stuff.
Yeah.
And it's like, why not just give me a campaign mode where it's like, oh, you have this many
like Galactic Conquest.
Yeah, like a Galactic Conquest, and just let me do the multiplayer, but make it a little more, make it like a 99 Nights or what's that other game that's really popular where you fight Dynasty Warriors, know, where it's like, you get a BAR and you're like the actual class, and all the other soldiers are like lesser soldiers somehow. Maybe that'd be too.
They're all privates.
Yeah, they're all privates, and you're like a lieutenant. There you go. No, but I mean, like, how cool would that be if you had campaign modes where you're actually managing a campaign and you have different art? I'm just. Because Battlefield's all about you're in the middle of a battle.
All of these ideas have existed in EA games. They just need to put them together.
Yeah. What we don't need is like some offensive single player mode about some overcomplicated politics and war. None of that needs to happen. Just remake Galactic Conquest. It's fine. That's how you can do it.
But World War II coded.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, yeah, that's enough of our fan fiction about Battlefield. Okay, anything else you want to say about this?
No.
All right, so moving on here, GamesIndustry.biz's Samuel Roberts spoke with Leslie Benzies, director for MindsEye and founder, I wasn't sure if there was a co-founder or not, of Build a Rocket Boy. So MindsEye is coming out in a couple weeks now, I think, and it was one of those games that we knew it was coming out, and then not a whole lot was said about it. It seemed like it didn't get a ton of press, and then a bunch of stuff has been said about it all of a sudden, and it's made it really interesting and weird. I want to read a couple quotes here. Yeah, these are like meat sandwich quotes, so there's a lot to dig in here. MindsEye is going to be a single player game with a runtime of about 20 hours. But the idea behind like what else MindsEye is going to be is kind of complicated and weird and seemingly kind of undefined. So I'm going to read these quotes and then we'll discuss. So when asked about the multiplayer component of MindsEye, MindsEye said, quote, "The dream from the building side is to allow players the opportunity to create their own multiplayer open world games with ease. So anyone could pick up the game, jump in, dive around, stop at a point where they see something of interest, build a little mission, jump back in the car, drive again, build another mission. Once you've built a couple hundred of these, you've built your own open world game." So that's the build side. From our side, we want to create a place where people can socialize, play together, and engage in the stories that we build. So we have plans next year to launch an open world multiplayer game that takes place a year after MindsEye finishes. In the interim, we also have an open world free roam game that these stories, all of these stories interconnect in a fairly unique and original way, which I think players like these days. They like the complexity of deeper stories. Okay, so there's one quote with a lot with a lot in it. Okay, moving on to the second quote here. Later, MindsEye was asked how the studio landed on the game being MindsEye being $60 and taking around 20 hours to finish, and he said, "So you've got MindsEye the campaign, and yes, it'll be about 20-ish hours. But you do have all the other side content. There's going to be this continuous stream of content. These days, there are so many different options for people. It's not just games. There's streaming TV. I don't think you can have filler content in games. I think people want the meat, and they want the potatoes. We've tried to make as much meat as we can, if that makes sense. I think that's a good length for a game. What you also find through data is that with big games, people don't play them all. The majority of people, 60% or 70% of people, don't actually play games to the end. So when you're making something, I would prefer, I'm sure the team would say the same, that you had the whole experience from start to finish and not create this 200-hour game. Create something that is finishable, but have some side things that will fill out the universe. A lot of the side missions on the play side of MindsEye do fill out the characters' backstories or do fill out what was happening in the world. Okay, so there's a lot going on here.
Mm-hmm.
It did not really clear up. It did and it didn't clear up what's going on with MindsEye. Because, okay, so user-generated content is not a new thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
It is a new buzzword, though. Because all these studio executives saw Roblox and are like, oh my god, we need to do that. You know, that was supposed to be a voice of him, like, frothing at the mouth. I wasn't going to froth into my mic, though. There is no frothing on these mics. Only me saying a stupid voice. So they saw Roblox and they were like, okay, we need to do that. And in some ways, again, user-generated content has been around for a super long time. Halo 3 had user-generated content. Yeah. Halo 2 did. You could create custom games. Now, it didn't have a way for people to like upload and save custom games, but if you knew how to set up zombies really quickly, you could get that going. Or Tower Power, or Trimmers, right? All those things, you just go into the game options real quick, set up Slayer, that's user-generated content. So this thing of user-generated content is not new. But I think what I'm confused about is like what the scale and what the goal of it is, right? Because if I'm skeptical about sort of the current focus on UGC from big companies for a few reasons. Specifically, it means that a game requires a certain level of investment from you that's more complicated than just playing the game, right? So back in the day when you played Halo 2, you played the single player, you played the multiplayer. That user-generated content was just something that kind of organically cropped up.
Yeah.
Same thing with Halo 3.
That was something groups of people wanted to go play a game mode.
Yes.
A specific idea they had for a game mode, and they would do that.
Yeah.
It wasn't they were being provided tools to go create a game within the game. They were using what was already there, teams, like divvying out who goes where, easy things like that, to naturally create this.
Yes, it was organic. What tools were there. Hey, go have fun with this.
Yeah.
It's not meant to like be a massive enterprise for us. It's just here, there's this thing. Another thing is like, how is the UGC housed? How does it spread? Does it spread via algorithms? What kind of interface are you using? Because that's going to come with certain systemic problems, right? Like in Roblox, or really just anything. There's going to be trend chasing.
Yeah.
There's going to be things that get popular because a fucking streamer played it. And all of a sudden, that's the only type of game that anyone's going to build. And that limits what the community is doing. Because if you're somebody who invests a lot of time into creating for that game, you can't create things for, especially when you're in a more insular community, which Roblox has a shit ton of people playing it, but it is the Roblox community, right?
Yeah.
It is the Roblox market. So it's like, if you want to be financially successful in Roblox, you have to you have to bend yourself to these trends, right? Which means instead of just being able to create things organically, like zombies or tower power, you are now just trend chasing. It's just a smaller version of what Electronic Arts is doing right now. And I think that's bad for creativity. I think that's bad for game design. It just turns user-generated content into a chase to make a thing that is currently making money right now. And that sucks. Another worry is like, are the skills people learn in building a thing, can you transfer those outside the ecosystem? You know, if you make a game in Roblox, can you take that out and then make that same game in Unity? I don't know. I've never made a game in Roblox, but that's another thing that I often worry about. And then I think another worry about this is like, okay, if your plan is this like user-generated content tail, what opportunities are we passing by for this? And by this I mean, my example would be Bone Labs, right, which is a VR game. You've heard of Boneworks. So Boneworks is a really cool physics-heavy VR game, right? That kind of plays a little like Portal and Half-Life, and it's kind of undefined, and its story is okay, but it's a really solid shooter, really fun. Bone Labs is the sequel, and Bone Labs leaned a lot on UGC. The idea was it seems like, I don't know if the developers have said this, but the game plays as if, and is structured as if, it leans, there's even a menu for mods, it leans into user-generated content. And that sucks, because instead of Boneworks getting a sequel, where you have a single-player campaign with missions and things that are created like that, instead you have a much more tech demo-y single-player in Bone Labs, and then the rest is just up to the community. Yeah. And Bone Labs doesn't have workshop implementation, so you have to go to Nexus or whatever, which means things are a little more complicated, because downloading mods that way isn't always as seamless. So it's like, what we got out of that is we didn't really get a Boneworks sequel, and we got a sequel where the paradigm is different. Now it's about UGC, and if you want to get into it, you have to do work. You have to find the mods, upload them, make sure they're working, and yeah. And so that, to me, kind of killed my interest in Bone Labs, because Boneworks had its own stuff going for it that could be built on as a single-player experience, but that's not really what happened in Bone Labs. So when you're making MindsEye, and it's like, okay, we're going to have this plan for, you know, all this user-generated content, what are we missing out on? You know, what are we not getting because your plan is, instead of just making a game, you have this other plan for like a multi-game franchise, right? Instead of just making a game, you're making something bigger and more complicated and more conceptually heady. And I don't know, that kind of sucks, because can't you just make a game? Why do you have to build like a franchise around it and get all this investment and, you know, have all this stuff that has to go right for it to work? Well, to dig into the quotes here, I mean, I don't know if this is what he meant, but like, the idea that like you can do this, I don't know if Grand Theft Auto is a good example, but Grand Theft Auto has user-generated content as
Yeah.
well. So I guess, in a sense, you could drive around in GTA 5, see a building you think is cool, and then go into the multiplayer mode and maybe make some kind of multiplayer thing there. So you can kind of do that. Now, maybe in MindsEye, it's more streamlined. I don't know. But the point I'm trying to make here is, if you do that thing where you stop at a building and you make a mission and you do that a couple hundred times, what kind of time sink is that? So it's like this, I don't know, this idea that like, how many people are going to do that? What is the quality of that? And then how is that going to be delivered? And I don't know, it seems a little ridiculous. And why not you just making an open world action game is not easy, but it's just like, why not use the tools yourself and make your own, because you're the game developers, instead of hoping that
outsourcing to the gamers.
Instead of outsourcing to people that bought some version of your game or whatever. Another thing is like, doesn't that kind of contradict the people want the meat and potatoes thing? I don't know, if you're so concerned with people getting meat and potatoes, and you're so concerned with 20 hours is a solid length for a game. It's like, doesn't that go against then your
unlimited user created,
the idea that users are going to create all this content that can be played, right? Because like the people at Roblox, they want those kids, they want their eyes on Roblox all the time.
Yeah.
Right? So there's retention, there's all that stuff. And that is their goal. They don't care about like trying to make games digestible and paced well. They don't give a shit about any of that. What they give a shit about is that Timmy's wasting money to put a shirt on his little blocks guy, right? So that is the thing that they're concerned about. This seems like wishy-washy and back and forth. Because on one hand, it's like, we want to create this thing that is meat and potatoes, that doesn't take a lot of time, because time is precious nowadays, and we're competing with TikToks and Instagrams. But over here, all you need to do is make a couple hundred missions. So it's like, well, which is it? Are you building a game that is made to not soak up a lot of time? Or are you building a game that is supposed to be a platform where your users are going to generate a shit ton of content that somehow creates more value for people that are already playing, and then those people need to, I guess they would have to play the content that has been made, because what is the point if a bunch of content is being made but it's not being played? So it just seems contradictory and weird. And again, why not just make a game and sell it? I don't know. I don't want to sound dismissive, but can we? Sometimes I just feel like, maybe we're overcomplicating this? Like, guys,
well,
game industry, maybe we're overcomplicating this.
So they didn't want to make a 200-hour game, but they want people to spend 200 hours in there.
Yeah, well, and I guess that's fine. Like, but again, then why say that people want the meat and potatoes, but then say, hey, you need to go make 200 missions. But isn't that not the meat and potatoes? I don't know. It's difficult to get my head around.
It's because they're trying to eat their cake and have it too.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the point.
Yeah,
I think that's kind of the inherent contradiction here. Is it doesn't really seem like there is like a defined goal or anything. It just seems like I don't know. It seems like it's just another UGC trend chasing thing, but Benzies kind of has his own opinions about games, even if they contradict what his game is apparently actually going to be from like a reality standpoint. I don't know. I also really dislike the idea that video games are a zero-sum game. I hate that. If people want to spend 6 hours a day on TikTok, just fucking let them do that. Just, I don't know. There has to be a market for people who like to play video games, right? Okay. Make games for them. I know that's difficult. I know that's not easy, but it's just like, I hate this idea that we have to try and jackhammer people away from their devices to get them sucked into your thing so that they're only doing your thing. because that's just not, I don't know, that just, to me, that's just all about retention and monetization, and that's not, to me, that's not exciting. That's just greedy. And you're competing with EAs and Take-Twos, and they already have gigantic warehouses, like gigantic games where they shove people into to play, and Call of Duties and stuff like that. The market's already saturated. We have this discussion all the time with live service games. It's like, I don't know, I feel like, yeah, if you do make your 20-hour game, isn't that a good thing? Because then when people buy it, they don't have to think about it as a giant investment that they're going to have to put hundreds of hours into. I don't know.
And that may be also along that right there might be kind of why he's pointing towards where, we're not a 100-hour game. It's because there is a bit of a stigma towards games being inflated for the sake of player retention.
Yeah.
But if he's like, hey, we're just a 20-hour game, and if you happen to spend 200 hours in it playing the user-generated content, we didn't do that. That was you guys.
Yeah, but
they're laying out the tools for you to spend 100+ hours out there. But it's not them putting out a 100-hour game, a 200-hour game.
But the thing is, like, they seem to have a bunch of different. This MindsEye project is like a large platform multi-game idea. There's another game called Everywhere that this is like associated with.
Yeah.
So on the one, so let's say that the only game that existed was MindsEye.
Yeah.
And they had this multiplayer thing where you could create missions for it.
Mm-hmm.
I think what you're saying would make sense. Hey, we made this 20-hour game, and yeah, just like Halo 2 or Halo 3. Who knows what the community is going to do, but we're focused on this and maybe an expansion, right?
Mm-hmm.
Think Halo Reach. We're focused on this, expansions, map packs, whatever.
Yeah.
We're going to give them Forge World, and whatever the hell they do with Forge World, cool. As opposed to, we're going to give them Forge World, and then we're going to have to monetize Forge World somehow and figure out how to monetize, because that's a different paradigm where you're not looking at Forge World as this thing that you're giving the community to have fun with and like foster people playing your multiplayer game. Instead, it's like you have to like monetize it somehow or whatever, right? I think there's a distinction there that's important. And that's besides the fact that it includes like different games that are kind of confusing to like understand how exactly they're organized and stuff like that. I don't know. I wasn't sure what I thought about MindsEye. I thought it looked cool. Sci-fi, cars, drones, guns. That sounds like
generated content.
It sounds like a good time. And then I read some of this interview and I was just like, what the hell is going on? Like, I just don't I don't understand why all this has to be so complicated, why we have to come up with like, every day we hear like games cost $10 trillion to make. It's like, okay, so how do we, and then the next day some guy's like, they cost $10 trillion and we're going to make them even more complicated by making them huge multi-IP fucking projects. And it's just like, why can't we just simplify things, scale things down a bit, not trend, why does, sorry, I don't want to go on too much of a rant here. Is there anything else you would like to say about this?
Don't think so. I think I'll just leave it there.
Okay, yeah. The one thing that I would like to close with a little bit, I guess, is I want to reiterate that I really dislike this because it's becoming more and more prominent, people talking like this, that games compete with TikTok. But I don't know. I disagree with that.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to watch baseball, just go watch baseball. If Rob Manfred, he's still the commissioner, right? Yeah, isn't he? I think so. Why am I all of a sudden confused about who the baseball commissioner is? Yeah, Rob Manfred's still the commissioner.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. He's going to retire soon, I think, or whatever. It doesn't matter. Like, if you're constantly, I don't know, like, taking a hatchet to the sport to figure out how to make it compete with like TikTok and stuff like that, you're just doing a disservice to your audience that is the market of people that are interested in baseball because it's baseball, right? You're turning it into completely something else if you were to do that. So it's like with video games, if you're trying to compete with TikTok and books and sports and whatever the fuck else, it's just like I don't know. Maybe the people that are reading books instead of playing video games just aren't that interested in video games. And maybe the people that are browsing TikTok for 6 hours, why anyone would fucking do that, I don't know. But sure, they do. And you know what? They do that for a reason. And maybe they're just not interested in video games. Yeah. And fine, stop trying to win them over. It seems so insane to me that there isn't a market that there isn't a large enough market of people who are just interested in playing games that you can build a sustainable business off of.
But Tyler, infinite growth infinitely.
Well, okay, you're right. I'm wrong.
Yeah.
And that's what this podcast is all about.
Yeah.
Investment.
Gotchas and infinite growth.
Yes. Forever into eternity. Heat death of the universe. Meaning is
not if we grow infinitely enough.
We can just create suns somehow.
Yeah.
That's what we need to do. We need to get in 10,000 years. There's going to be so many Concords, so many games that didn't do very well, that we should just take all the boxes of these games, all the boxes of Anthem, right, and shove them into one infinitesimal area in space, and that creates heat because of the gravity, and then we have a new star. That's how we
problem solved.
That's how we bear new stars, just like that. Okay, are you is there anything else you want to talk about?
No.
All right. Follow us, youtube.com/gaming discourse, patreon.com/the gaming discourse. Check out the Friday morning blog this week. And we'll see you next time.